Hello, hello, hello. What's up? What's up? What's up, everybody? This is Mark Hatcher of the Amazon Global Sales Team, representing with the Amazon Fishbowl team. And for those that you don't know, when I'm not doing this and sitting in front of you guys talking about cool things with cool people, as we will do today, and hosting moderated discussions, what I am also doing is working as the global sales leader for the Amazon Turkey team. And my role is really just to take successful sellers on the Amazon.com platform and convert them over into the Amazon.com.tr platform. And today I have the distinct pleasure of bringing to you Melanie Wilding. Melanie's book, Trust Yourself and Stop Overthinking and Channel Your Emotions for Success at Work, is launching today, and it's already debuting as #1 on the Amazon new release list. So that's a great thing. Melanie is a writer, a social worker, a leadership and organizational development practitioner, a professional advisor extraordinaire. She's an executive coach for sensitive high achievers who help sensitive leaders escape self-doubt and imposter syndrome and master their emotions. So, Melanie, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to be in such esteemed company. You know, it's not every day that I get to sit before Rutgers and Columbia graduates who are rocking out and embracing their entrepreneurial spirit. And then it's launch day for you too. I mean, how awesome is that? You know, so at least some of the projections are in, right? You're already #1 on the Amazon new releases list. So, you know, I think that's a beautiful thing. What would you say?
Thank you so much. I have been floored by the response to the book so far. We have lots of positive reviews coming in from readers all over the world, that's what's most meaningful, is to know that the book is actually making an impact for people.
An impact is a good thing, you know, especially for, you know, high achievers and overachievers. And let me tell you, Amazon is filled with both. So with that being the case, you know, it's good that we can share this with our audience and hopefully walk away with some nuggets that can, you know, help people to manage some of the stress that they have working here at Amazon. Because at Amazon, in addition to it always being day one, we're always managing the ambiguity of success. And in doing so, that helps us to become better. So thank you for that. So your book, Trust Yourself, Stop Overthinking and Channel Your Emotion, provides a roadmap for addressing negative self-talk. How did you land on that subject, and was it something you wanted to personally address or something you discovered in your coaching exploits?
Yeah, a little of both, honestly. And I think that's how many of the best books come about. They say you teach what you most need to learn, and that is certainly the case for me. You know, I am a sensitive striver myself. I am the personality type I talk about in this book. And in the beginning of the book, the introduction, I share my story, which is that all my life I have struggled with being told I was more sensitive, but also being incredibly hard on myself, having a very loud and harsh inner critic, to the point where that drove me to very severe burnout. And as I was building my coaching practice over the last 10 years, I noticed that my clients were having many of the same challenges, really wrestling with self-criticism, perfectionism, imposter syndrome, self-doubt, really this constellation of challenges that was coming about because of their sensitivity, their profound reactiveness, and being so affected by what was happening both within and around them, but also being high achieving, being driven, holding themselves to high expectations and standards, always wanting to do more and accomplish more and make an impact. So all tremendous strengths, but when we don't have the right tools to manage them, and most of us are never given those tools, can lead to challenges. So combination of both the personal and professional really coming together.
Well, that's good to know. And you kind of slid a term in there for me that I was going to come back to, but I know it's one of your, you know, your defining terms. You mentioned, you know, the sensitive strivers, and you talked about yourself being one. Explain to the audience, you know, what a sensitive striver is. And I should note to the audience that we're going to be coming back to that term a lot throughout this discussion, but explain what a sensitive striver is and what are the characteristics of it.
Yeah, a sensitive striver is someone who is both high achieving, but also highly sensitive. So these are people who are career oriented. They push themselves to set and achieve high goals, very driven, but they also think and feel everything more deeply. So we are talking about about 1 in 5 people, about 20% of the population, that has this biological disposition, actual brain differences, that leads them to be more attuned to their own emotions and their own inner workings, as well as those of other people, and to really sense subtleties, to sense changes in the environment. So that is what a sensitive striver is. It's really that combination of being driven and high achieving with that high sensitivity piece, and those two factors coming together.
As a person who considers himself pretty aware, self-aware, as I read that, I thought about, am I a sensitive striver? And I think I am, but I'll come back to that as you evolve and give us some of the nuggets that go along with being a sensitive striver. I noticed when I read your book and I perused some of the material, I noticed that your book was broken down into 4 different quadrants. And those quadrants were build self-awareness, tame self-sabotage, achieve self-confidence, and sustain self-growth. So those things, not only were there progression, but one of the things that stood out about that is that they all began with self. So I think that talked about the actualization of self-awareness. So can you speak to that and then speak to why the book was broken down in that way?
Sure, sure. So, I couldn't write a book called Trust Yourself without really focusing on yourself. And that's really the whole thesis and emphasis behind the book, is to really listen to and tune into and build confidence in yourself rather than trying to source it and find it from outside of you. So that is specifically why all of those sections are focused on self this, self that, because I truly believe, and I have found this in my work over and over, that you cannot achieve external changes until you make internal changes. Internal changes lead to external results, because if you want different results, if you want different outcomes, you need to think differently. You need to change your beliefs, specifically your beliefs about yourself and what you think you're capable of, good enough for. And so that's why so much of the book is focused on your own inner workings to produce and get better external results. And the book, I really wrestled with the sections and the chapters and laying them out that way. And so actually where I landed is that I wanted to turn the typical approach to personal and professional development on its head. Because I don't know about anybody out there, but I would get really frustrated by reading professional development books that would say, start with your big vision. Start with what you want for yourself and your life purpose, and go from there to achieve it. And to me, that was an automatic stop. I would just tune out and disconnect, because I had so much trouble thinking of what that is for me, defining my purpose and my passion, what I want for myself. And I find that for my clients too, that many times their energy, their mental and emotional bandwidth is so clouded by some self-sabotaging habits, for lack of a better word, things like overthinking, emotional reactivity, a lack of boundaries, for example, that it's impossible for them to think about those larger, more broader items unless we get those day-to-day things under control first. So that's why I flipped the approach on its head. So the book really starts with helping you understand who you are and accepting who you are as a sensitive striver. Then we move on to conquering those self-sabotaging habits. Then we zoom out and talk about self-confidence. How do you define success on your own terms? And then last, making sure that I don't want to leave people hanging. I want to make sure that you read this book and that you can actually sustain some of the habits and the growth that you gain from it. So that's why that last section is making sure the changes you've put into place actually last.
Okay. Well, that's good. And I know you mentioned like this, the self-awareness piece, self-sabotage, self-confidence, and self-growth. And you mentioned the sensitive strivers again. I was struck by the fact when reading this book that there were also nuggets there for people who may not be sensitive strivers. Can you speak to that just a bit?
Sure. I think I have had people who are not sensitive strivers read this book and say, this was so helpful to me. So I think everything in the book is universal to anyone who has ever struggled with self confidence in the workplace, or who wants to speak more assertively, for example, and regain their power. You don't have to be a sensitive striver, but certainly all of the techniques really do come from the frame of really helping that 15 to 20% who is this type of personality. But the techniques in there are will help you regardless.
Well, that's good. It's good to know that the book has versatility for those of us who consider themselves self-strivers, as well as individuals who may still be trying to define what they actually are. Another question that kind of came up that when I thought about it was, how self-awareness was the overall anchor. And you touched on that a little bit when you talked about overturning, how people think about how to executive coaching, so to speak. And so my question would be there, can you just talk about how it frames your approach to coaching, and like when you start with self-awareness, what are you looking for and how does it anchor how you handle your clients?
Yeah, self awareness is the foundation of any change, and particularly for so many of my clients, they are on autopilot. Right. We may be so reactive to situations around us. We may be overworking ourselves so much that we're not picking our head up. We're just reacting to everything that's going on around us. Um, or we may be so filled with shame around who we are. So many people come to me saying, "What is wrong with me? Why can't I get it together? Why can't I grow a thicker skin? Why do I take everything so personally?" That I wanted to start the book with really helping people reframe what it means to be sensitive. So in the book, I go into the fact that this is a real trait difference. This is a well studied for 20, 30 years now, that people who are sensitive have different neurological wiring, have different activation in their brain. And when you understand that this is a very real difference, just as someone may be an introvert or extrovert, you can be highly sensitive or less sensitive, right? But it leads to greater self acceptance, and that knowledge is power, because once you have power, once you have knowledge about yourself, you're empowered to make changes and make different choices about your day-to-day behavior and how you show up.
No, that's good. I'm glad you shared that because I found myself thinking at some points of the book, what if I don't consider myself sensitive? If I'm not sensitive, but I'm glad you said that sensitivity is more like a spectrum. You could be more sensitive or less sensitive. So that's really a good thing. And then one of the ways or one of the tools that you expanded on in the book for doing some personal assessments and trying to figure out, where you were along those spectrums were the wheel of balance, right? So tell me about the wheel of balance and the strive qualities.
Yes. So the wheel of balance and the strive qualities, what you're referring to is the assessment and the framework that really underlies the entire book. So let's start with the strive qualities. Those are 6 key qualities that define what it means to be a sensitive striver. And it's important to recognize these because if anyone is a sensitive striver, you have probably found that it feels very overwhelming. You don't know where to start when it comes to wanting to change. You don't understand where these reactions are coming from. And so this framework helps you pinpoint and prioritize the areas you want to work on first. So strive, S, stands for sensitivity. May seem obvious that a sensitive striver is sensitive, but this specifically refers to sensory sensitivity. So being more perceptive, observant, attuned to your environment. When your sensitivity is well balanced, you are able to be calm and composed. You're getting enough rest and downtime for what you need. You have good structure to manage the level of stimulation. But when this is unbalanced, it looks like overstimulation, overwhelm, can look like freezing or panicking under pressure, for example. So really refers to having that very outsized nervous system response to situations. So that's our S. Then we have T, which is for thoughtfulness. Thoughtfulness, sensitive strivers, we are deep thinkers, intuitive, reflective, critical thinkers. But when that is unbalanced, can look like worrying, indecision, rumination, all of the above. The R is responsibility. This one I see a lot with people who are leaders. So sensitive strivers, very dedicated, dependable, can be relied on to follow through. But we can't bear to let people down, even if it means we have to sacrifice our weekend or work 12-hour days, for example. That high drive of responsibility sticks around. Then we have the I, inner drive. That is the ambition side. Setting high goals, setting a lot of goals, putting a lot of pressure on yourself to succeed. Obviously can make a big impact, very high achieving, but can also lead to perfectionism, that you set such rigid and unrealistically high goals that you actually set yourself up for failure.
Right.
V is vigilance. That is being attuned and attentive to other people's needs. Being perceptive of changes in body language, for example, or being able to sense a reaction from one of your direct reports if they're upset with something. But when vigilance is on overdrive, can lead to reading in to everything, reading into a throwaway comment that someone makes, for example, or being so attentive to what everybody else thinks you should do that you stop listening to yourself. And then our last one is E for emotionality. Sensitive strivers, as you can imagine, we feel things in a big way. We have a lot of emotions. We are great at motivating people through emotions. We get the upside of the highs of excitement and elation, but we can get stuck in fear, anxiety, some of those negative modes more than most people. So those are our strive qualities. And as you heard, each one has a side where it's balanced, where it can be our superpower. But if it's unbalanced, it can be a hindrance and hold us back. Right. So the wheel of balance is the tool we use to map that out and measure where you are most in balance or out of balance with your strive qualities. And it's a visual way that you map out. There are worksheets in the book to help you with this, and actually additional worksheets available on my website for that. But you map out where you currently are and where you want to be. And so you're actually able to prioritize, okay, where are my ratings the lowest? Where am I most motivated? And have the opportunity to prioritize first. And at different junctures, at the beginning of the book, you take this, we do a midpoint check-in, and then at the end of the book, you see where you end up. So you can actually measure your progress throughout the book. And the tool of balance is something you can always come back to. So it's a very handy way of almost diagnosing yourself as a sensitive striver where your biggest opportunities are.
Right. The diagnosis piece was key, and I found it to be really interesting. I felt, a little overqualified or underqualified or out over my skis a bit as I got into the tool, but I need to take it again at the end since I took it early on. But let me move on. Your book dived deeply into imposter syndrome and how it clearly identifying that phenomenon drives a lot of the work you do. Can you describe imposter syndrome and how it shows up in the day-to-day activities of high achieving professionals like Amazonians?
Sure. I think a lot of people are going to resonate with this. Imposter syndrome is that feeling of being a fake or a fraud despite your accomplishments. So you may be someone who has engineering degrees and certifications, yet you show up for every day to work and think that this is the day they're going to find out I actually have no idea what I'm doing here. Right. And so imposter syndrome, this belief that you're not qualified or capable to do your work, can hold you back in a number of ways. It can hold you back from speaking up and sharing your ideas because you fear looking ill-informed or stupid. It can stop you from raising your hand for stretch opportunities or to manage a new project, for example. Can hold you back from asking for what you're worth. So there are a lot of ways that imposter syndrome shows up. Perfectionism as well. You may, in an effort to make sure no one finds out you're a fraud, you may work on something, redo a slide deck 100 times because you want to control and make sure nobody finds out you don't know what you're doing. So there's a lot of different ways that imposter syndrome can show up.
Yeah, that's interesting. You talk about the slides. I mean, one of the ways at Amazon we kind of counterbalance against the imposter syndrome is that we very rarely use slide presentations. In most instances, we will pass out a paper or a deck of some sort to be read and then to be discussed in totality afterwards, so that people aren't swayed away by exploding presentations or fancy graphics and things like that. So that's a great thing. You went into different types of people. You said overfunctioning people, overachievers, high achievers, and perfectionists are consistent traits and descriptions for us as Amazonians, right? And tech leaders too. And trust yourself, you coined a phrase, or let's say a movement called sensitive strivers. How do they show up in the workplace from an operational standpoint? Like how can I recognize a sensitive striver that's on my team or that's in my group or that I'm working with on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. And so one telltale of a sensitive striver, particularly someone who is unbalanced. Let's talk about that, because a balanced sensitive striver can show up a little differently. But unbalanced, many people show up with what I call the honor roll hangover, which is a mix of perfectionism, so being highly self-critical. Anything you do is not enough. For example, it's not good enough. You could have done better. You should have worked more, right? Somebody else did it better. So perfectionism, people pleasing, saying yes to every single request that comes your way, feeling guilty, compromising your viewpoints or your values, just easily being swayed by other people's viewpoints and values, and over functioning. And that can look like swooping in to fix every situation, rescue people, give them the answer instead of coaching them to find the answers for themselves. So that's what an unbalanced sensitive striver can look like. Now, balanced sensitive striver, many of my clients are leaders, and some of the things that they are remarked on, their leadership qualities, is high empathy, right? They are the one who understands people. They usually have the highest engagement ratings in terms of their teams and team satisfaction. They are experts at being able to make people feel psychologically safe and seen, which we know boosts innovation and creativity and engagement, productivity, all of that. The sensitive strivers are excellent strategic thinkers. Because we tend to synthesize information and process it more deeply, we make connections that other people miss. And so we're very good strategic thinkers. We highlight opportunities and gaps because we tend to anticipate eventualities. We're often a couple steps ahead of other people because we've already made connections. So we're great strategic thinkers, and we're excellent conflict mediators. Many of my clients are really good at sensing when a situation may go awry and actually preventing that, being the one to intervene and align different stakeholders to get people on the same page. So it's a little bit more about what a more balanced sensitive striver would look like.
No, those are good, and I can tell you they show up around here pretty regularly. We have a pretty assertive and sometimes even aggressive workforce. We all play nice together for the most part, but those attributes show up pretty regularly. You go to great lengths in the book to describe also what sensitive strivers are not too, and I thought that was good. Can you compare and contrast, let's say, sensitive strivers with some of the monikers that we use around here, like introvert and perfectionists and overachievers? I know you've touched on perfectionists and overachievers already, but maybe introvert and extrovert. Can you compare and contrast the sensitive striver within those two spectrums?
Sure. So about 70% of sensitive people are also introverted. So there is a lot of overlap here. And sensitive people and introverts do share a lot of commonality, like needing downtime and space to process, for example. But about 30% of sensitive people are extroverted, and which means they gain energy by being around people. So they love leading teams. They love collaboration, for example, and they really excel at that. So that's the difference there. With perfectionists, not all self-perfectionists are self-aware. many perfectionists are not self-aware. They don't understand their behavior, the impact it has on them or other people. Whereas sensitive strivers are sometimes overly aware and self-conscious about that. And many perfectionists are not accomplished in their career because they're their qualities tend to hold them back. Whereas many sensitive strivers, their perfectionism is not so paralyzing. In many ways, that conscientiousness is what makes them extremely successful. But they hit a point in their careers where what got them here won't get them there, and they need to change their ways. And then last is that all people who are overachievers are not sensitive. And I think we can realize that. We've all had people on our team who are overachievers, but they are not this type of very empathetic, highly emotionally reactive personality, for example.
Those people, bulls in the china shop, you know, because they're just going to continue to plow through. And, you know, when meeting people like that, I mean, your book goes into pretty good details, talking about the importance of boundaries in high performance matrix organizations like Amazon. So I would like you to explain boundaries as they're described in the book, and how boundaries playbook communicate the environment you need to survive. So if I'm not mistaken, there are four quadrants, which is home, work, health, and self. Can you kind of go into that for me and tell me about those boundaries?
Sure. So, boundaries, just for definition, I define as healthy limits that create space between you and another entity, whether that entity is another person, a work product, for example, or even space between you, your best self, and that self sabotaging self. So, boundaries really allow you to say no to certain things so you can say yes to what serves you. And I want to offer that because many of us think boundaries are a bad thing. They're mean or they're harsh, but really boundaries, especially when delivered very diplomatically, actually not only serve you, but they also serve other people. So, yes, in the book, I go into the exercise in that chapter is actually based around identifying boundaries in the four most important quadrants of your life. So, workplace boundaries, which I think many of us have had to wrestle with what that even means over the last year or so, your personal life. Boundaries in your personal life with your family, your friends, for example, your health, how you take care of your well-being, and that S in the strive quality, your sensitivity, your nervous system. And then last is your relationship with yourself, because as I said, internal boundaries, the relationship you have between your best self and your most self-sabotaging self, is the one that people often neglect.
So that's why those boundaries are truly important in that regard. And, you know, it's interesting to you speak of that, and it makes me go back to, you think you're splitting introverts versus extroverts into the 70-30 kind of pocket. I would think it would be, you know, maybe 60-40 extroverts, but I have it all backwards. But your book kind of plays out how that's important and why that's important. In one of the sessions that I heard you speaking on, you framed you spoke to framing the importance or intimidating assignment in the following manner, by asking, when you start feeling that self-doubt and things coming up, by asking, how would this work if it were easy? To give yourself some frame of mind towards the success aspect of it. I thought that was brilliant. Can you speak to the origin of that exercise and what the desired outcome is when you ask that question of yourself?
Yes, it's because sensitive strivers tend to overthink. Our depth of processing can lead us to overcomplicate something, and we will find the most convoluted way, or the most in depth way to achieve something. So, what would this look like if it were easy? Can also strip out some of the self doubt, some of the stories you may be telling yourself about, and excuses, frankly, about why you can't do something, why you're not capable. So, asking yourself, what would this look like if I were easy? You really give yourself permission to act and to do what is best for you.
Well, good, good. I think with that being said, I mean, that was a great way to cut to the chase, and that's kind of how I read it when I was, you know, thinking about the tool that you gave there. In another instance within Trust Yourself, you spoke of giving your inner critic a name, and I thought that was really, really a cool thing. And I think in the example you spoke of, the critic, you called it Darth Vader in one instance, and you said, you know, in giving the critic a name, you would say, you know, all right, Darth Vader, you can ride with me, but you surely ain't driving. Can you explain that phenomenon and tell me, a little bit more about that? Because I found that to be super helpful because it gave context and it put the prospect of limiting that voice into context. So can you do that for me?
Of course, that is probably one of my favorite little hacks from the book is naming your inner critic, giving it an identity outside of you. And this creates psychological distance. That's what you're doing with that. Rather than being so fused with those negative thoughts and that narrative that's in your head, you start to see it as something that is separate from you, which gives you a moment of pause, gives you some space to assess, to really make a decision about, is this what I want to think? And so actually, also giving it a name, something like Darth Vader, or, I've had people call theirs Cruella de Vil, for example, making it something lighthearted and silly takes away some of its power as well. It changes your relationship with your inner critic. So it's really, it seems small, but it's very powerful for those reasons.
No, it was definitely powerful, and it almost seemed overly simplistic, but I did give it a try. And I just thought it was super helpful and it was brilliant. So I wanted to make sure that I brought that up after discovering it and amongst your many tools. So now that we know how to self-identify, what advice do you have for the sensitive strivers of Amazon and the rest of the tech world? I mean, how can we, keep ourselves in order after we self-identify ourselves as self-strivers and land ourselves along the wheel of balance and, use these wonderful tools you have to give context to how we show up? Can you provide just an overview of advice that you would have for the sensitive strivers at Amazon?
Of course, yeah. Well, read the book. But in all seriousness, the book is really laid out as a roadmap to help you, to really bring you on your journey as a sensitive striver through understanding yourself, taming that self-sabotage, then building up your confidence in your own definition of success, and then sustaining it all the way to things like speaking more assertively and overcoming setbacks. And if there was one thing in particular I would say to people, it's about starting to view your sensitivity as more of a strength and starting to talk to your team, to your manager about the value that it brings, about your level of being observant and perceptive, and again, seeing those opportunities that others miss. What does that mean about the value that you're bringing to the team? And one exercise in particular that's really valuable for my clients is creating a me manual or a user manual, you may have heard it called, where you are defining with your manager, with the rest of your team, how you work, how you think, how do you like to process information, how do you learn best, what's your preferred communication style, what does it look like when you are at your best, how about when you're stressed out? And that can be really helpful to giving other people insight into how you tick so that they can get the best out of you and work with you better, but also coming from a frame of strength and empowerment about who you are, not shame and very apologetically feeling like, I'm sorry, I'm this way. I just can't get it together. But really saying, this is who I am. This is how to get the best out of me and work with me. And really starting to embrace that we all have different styles and there can be space for all of that. So I would definitely encourage everyone to create their own me manual and share that with everyone that they're working with.
Thank you for sharing the me manual piece. How does that differ from your brag book, or is the brag book just more about your accomplishments and the me manual is more about your authentic self?
Yeah, so brag file, slightly different. The me manual you share with other people, and that's really about your personality and how you work. Your brag file is for you. So your brag file is a space where you are reflecting on your wins, your moments of strength on a daily, but if not daily, a weekly basis. And this is really important for starting to rewire that inner critic, self-doubt, imposter syndrome that causes you to just overly focus on your weaknesses and everything you're bad at and the stupid comment you made in a meeting. Your brag file is a reflection. It's building the habit and it's starting to shift your attention to look at, what am I doing well? Where am I resourceful? What are my strengths? And it's important to realize that your brags don't have to be huge. They don't have to be, I landed $1 million client. It can be a moment of strength, like I said, of having a difficult conversation, pushing through an uncomfortable task, for example, moments where you made yourself proud. And it's important to do for yourself, psychologically and emotionally, to see that on the page, but also very useful when it comes performance review time to reflect back on what competencies have I been working on? What skills have I grown at? What type of work have I enjoyed doing and been my happiest doing? So very useful from multiple perspectives.
All right. Well, thank you for comparing and contrast. I wanted to make sure I got that in there because a lot of individuals do a lot of great things and don't take the time to acknowledge the specialness and the uniquenesses. And I can also appreciate the me file that you spoke of because it allows you to take some time and bring your full self forward and acknowledge the things that define you as who you are. So those are good. So as we start to downshift and come down to the closure here, one of the things I wanted to acknowledge and notice that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so, a lot of these anecdotes and a lot of these tools that you've used and a lot of things that are covered in the book will allow us to, help those in our community and hopefully help people at large. So some of the questions that I'll ask you will lend themselves to mental health awareness, but these are questions that we've obtained from the audience, from those who are watching, and I would love to get your insights as they pertain to the questions that are asked, okay? Are you ready? Okay, let's do it. So the term well-being encompasses many things: mental health, physical health, financial health, emotional health. What does the term well-being mean to you, and what actions do you take to support your own well-being on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis? What's your self-care regimen? I think is what it's asking.
Fantastic. Wow, I love this question. Well-being to me means optimal functioning, means I am doing the best I can in all areas of my life, in work, health, personal relationships. That is well-being to me. It's holistic, it's systems based. It's those are working together. Those systems in my life are working together well. I'm not over indexing on one and under on another. And for me, some of the habits that work very well, if I have one strength, it is self-discipline. And so I am a very, very structured person. I have my morning workouts are my saving grace in terms of that, just being space where I need to ease into my mornings. And so really creating that space in the mornings that is just for me to work out, to do my breathing exercises, for example. That is crucial for me to feel like I'm not being thrown into the day and just wake up and rush. As a sensitive person, that really throws me off if I have to rush somewhere. It doesn't work well. Limiting decision fatigue as much as possible. I'm pretty boring. I eat pretty much the same meals over and over and over again. And I'm totally fine with it. I know the foodies out there are probably like, how could you do that? But for me, it's worth saving the mental anguish, frankly, for me, that it would take to figure out what I need to eat every day and make it in advance and buy the things for that. It's so soothing to me to just know what that is. And there's predictability to that. I have started recently doing Wim Hof breathing, if anybody is familiar with that. Actually, his whole method, I do the whole cold showers in the morning, and I do his breathing methodology, and that has been really powerful for me. Really helped me sleep much better, has helped regulate my heart rate and my energy pretty significantly. So I would definitely recommend to check that out.
Wim Hof, is that what you said?
Wim Hof, so WIMHOF.
Good. For those of you listening, check out Wim Hof. It should be helpful to you. Get ready for those cold showers too. They'll help to wake you up. I've tried them. So stress is something that affects us all in different ways, and the pandemic has brought that to the forefront of many discussions. What are some of your coping mechanisms when you feel overwhelmed or stressed?
Ooh. For me, looking at, and I mentioned this in the book, using your emotions as guides. And like I said, we teach what we most need to learn. And so for me, always looking at what my emotions are signaling to me that needs attention. And so, one of those in particular, the strongest emotional signal is resentment. And resentment signals that you have let a situation go on for too long without addressing it, and that you need to set some limits and say no. And so, when I am stressed, really taking stock of those situations that are causing me resentment, bitterness, guilt, for example, and doing what I can to make brave decisions about possibly saying no or minimizing my commitments, for example. Um, for me, also, the principle of opposite action is very important. My reaction to stress is to go inward. I pull back from people in my life, from social media. I become very internal. I'm very much an internalizer. And so I know that when that happens, I need to take opposite action. That's exactly when I need to scroll to the bottom of the text messages on my phone and message the last person in there that I haven't reached out to in a long time. Or I have to call my family more often, or make sure with my fiance that we have more time with each other. So using the stress and seeing the pulling back the isolation as a signal to do something different has been very helpful for me.
Well, good. Thank you for sharing that. I think we can all take a little bit away from that one. Jeez, thank you. So we have a question from Anna. Anna asks, how has the burnout from the pandemic affected sensitive strivers en masse? And what steps can the sensitive strivers take to achieve some career self-care?
Yeah, fantastic question. And I actually just recently published an article for Harvard Business Review about a pretty troubling trend I've seen among sensitive strivers during the pandemic, which is paranoia. Workplace paranoia, where because people are isolated, because we're not in the office and getting informal nods of approval, it's very easy to overthink. It's very easy to think everyone is talking about you or messaging about you behind your back, or that they think you did a bad job, right? And so I have definitely seen that really the mental toll, the overthinking toll that it has taken on sensitive strivers, as well as the over functioning go into high gear. Um, the I have to be on at all hours to prove that I'm worthy. I have to do more to show my value. That really kicked into high gear during the pandemic. I saw a shift as we came into this new year. People were just totally tapped out. And so I've started to see a shift in people regulating that, but the lack of boundaries and really having to create, because we don't have the external boundary between leaving work anymore, you have to create your own internal boundaries and start compartmentalizing work. That has been a big challenge for many people.
Yeah, it definitely has for me. I'll raise my hand, for that one. Just having a little person at home too doesn't aid that situation in either. So JB asks, what tips can you share about how to find an effective coach?
One sec. Let me just make sure my video here that you can see me. Sorry about that. Give me one sec. Let's try again.
Yep.
Am I back now?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Finding an effective coach. Let's see. Yes, coaching is a little challenging because it's still like the wild, wild west. So finding an effective coach, first and foremost, go to your network. The best way to find a coach is through a referral. So if you have colleagues, a mentor, for example, or a membership organization that you're a part of where you can go and get some guidance about coaches other people have worked with, and you can hear firsthand about their experiences working with that coach, that is going to be your best bet. Second, I would say many coaches like myself put thought leadership out there. We publish articles, we write books, for example, to share our knowledge. So look for the topics that you're interested in. The way most people find me is that they've been Googling around for an article or a topic. They land on that, they come to my site, they read a lot more of what I have to say and enjoy my perspective, and then we work together. And so definitely looking for coaches who are putting out thought leadership, who are sharing advice and knowledge in a way that is resonating with you, that you're finding helpful, is very important. And do your research, do your due diligence in terms of having chemistry calls with coaches. You need to make sure that you feel comfortable with the person you're working with in terms of their background. Coaches come from all sorts of different backgrounds. Mine is in psychology, neuroscience, therapy, but many coaches come from the leadership world. They were former leaders. And so you really have to know what you're looking for and value most in a coach. Have those conversations, check that the chemistry is there, because it's first and foremost a very intimate relationship.
You have to show yourself a little bit. And I like what you said about, about referrals. Talk to some of your friends or colleagues to better understand, some of the challenges they've been through and some of the ways the coaches help them. And that can help to get you the right referral. And to Melody's point, read some of the articles. Melody's highly published in LinkedIn and highly published on the Medium. So both are good things. So question here from Catherine. Catherine asks, does the book go into varying levels of sensitivity? And she wants to know if she can relate to some of the examples you shared, but less on others. Curious to learn more about semi-sensitive strivers. There you go, another term.
Yes. As we were saying, it exists on a spectrum, and there is a assessment. The first chapter is really filled with diagnostics, and so there is a quiz to see how sensitive striver-ish you are. That's not exactly what it says, but that's what it's getting at. And people have fall on different levels of that. So it is an unscientific quiz. I will say that the items are based on science and what we know about sensitivity and high achievement from the research. But there is the diagnostic quiz. There is the Strive qualities assessment, where you will rate yourself on a level of 1 to 10 of balanced. So you can get a sense from there. But I would say overall, don't overthink it. If you think you are a sensitive striver, no matter how deeply you are welcome. And I guarantee that you will find some value in the book.
That's a great plug there. And I think you're right. I mean, again, it is on a spectrum. And so some may be semi-sensitive and some may be uber sensitive. But at the end of the day, we're all sensitive to some degree, right? So another question for Vanita. Vanita asked, as a mentor for junior team members for kids, she noticed a potential sensitive striver. How can she help them become more aware and overcome the challenges that come along with being a sensitive striver as a youth? And in context, she says negative thinking, oversensitivity, etc.
Oh, that's so fantastic. And thank you. Thank you for your work and your service, because I wish more mentors were asking these types of questions. So it says a lot about you. So first of all, as a mentor, I think, and Vanita, I am sure this is not you, but I'm saying this for everyone out there, of being aware of our language, right? Not using in a very derisive term. You're taking this too personally. You're being too sensitive about this. Stop being so emotional. Take the emotions out of it, right? And instead, coaching people to find out their perspective. In particular, coaching them to greater confidence and to trust themselves. So if you are mentoring sensitive strivers, they are highly insightful. They, like I said, they are making connections, they are inferring things, and they just may lack the conviction or the confidence to say it. And so coaching is really key with them, asking them, well, what do you think a solution would look like here? What would you try first? If this were easy, what would it look like? If you were your most confident self, what would you think? If you were in my shoes, what would you want me to tell you right now? So asking, really putting on that hat of a coach is going to help your sensitive striver really start to build that muscle of believing in themselves and not overly relying on you as the mentor for guidance and advice.
Being inquisitive, right? Asking those primary and secondary questions. That's what I heard. Okay, so as we come down home stretch, and I think we're just about done here, 5 years from now, if this were Nirvana, what will people be saying about trust yourself, stop overthinking, and channel your emotions at work? In a perfect world, what would they be saying, Melody?
I hope people will be saying that this book did for sensitive strivers what Susan Cain's Quiet did for introverts. I hope that we are rebranding and we are taking back sensitivity as something that is positive, because what we know, if you look at any future of jobs report, the World Economic Forum recently put out a future of jobs in 2025, the skills that are going to be most in demand are exactly the ones that sensitive strivers exemplify: critical thinking, problem solving, working with people, communication, self management. And so being sensitive in this way and being someone who is high achieving, driven, is exactly what we're going to need in leadership and management in the future.
Well, good. And what will your professional colleagues be saying about you after launching such a great piece of work?
That's a great question. I hope they will say that I am still humble and down to earth and kind. Most of all, I want to be of service. I want to help my colleagues. No one is, if anything, today is the launch day of the book, and I have seen more than ever before how I am just surrounded by incredibly intelligent, giving people. And, they say you're the sum of the people you surround yourself with. And today just really highlighted for me what incredible people I surround myself with. So I hope they are saying the same thing about me.
Well, no, that's good to know. I mean, surrounding yourself or the sum of the people who surround you is one good way of looking at it. I've also heard if your five closest friends, you're like the average of your five closest friends. I've heard that one too. And if you weren't acting as a licensed social worker, a writer, or a coach, or an author, what would Melody be doing?
I would probably be working at a newspaper or a magazine. I think I might have multiple realities. I might be doing that. I might be a fully tenured professor. I could also see that going and staying in the academic route or the research route. And once upon a time, I wanted to be a vet. So I think there is a version of me in somewhere in some alternate reality that might be a vet.
That's good. Well, I'll close with this one. Well, my mantra, my words to live by is presence over perfection. And it just means that you don't have to be perfect, but you have to be present. And I use that when I'm trying to figure out how to get optimal results. And what I would like to know, if you have a mantra that you live by, what is it and why is it important?
Before every coaching session, I say to me and through me. And that is the mantra I repeat myself, is to me and through me. And it is something that helps me access that intuition, that showing up, being present, trusting my knowledge, that in that moment, not to overthink things, not to try so hard, and to just be and to let that be good enough. So to me and through me.
Well, Melody, thank you so much, so much, so much to you and through you. That's right. Trust yourself, stop overthinking, channel your emotions at work is available on Amazon today. Melody, best wishes with the book, best wishes on future successes, and best wishes on being an inspiration to others. I appreciate you. I speak on behalf of Amazon and say we appreciate you and we look forward to bright things for you.
Thank you so much. This was a pleasure and a huge honor. So thank you.
Thank you. Bye now.